The deep void of space was silent as always. The outer colonies of Earth, scattered across the distant reaches of the galaxy, remained unaware of the anomaly that had just appeared on their long-range scanners. At first, the signal was weak, flickering like a ghostly whisper. Then suddenly, it became clear. A ship, massive and unmistakable, was approaching from the darkness. The name on the hull sent a wave of shock through the command center of Colony Vega 9. It was the HS Titan, a warship that had vanished 50 years ago in a deadly battle against the Tazalfar Empire. The Titan had been one of Earth's most powerful battleships, but it was lost with all hands during a disastrous deep space mission. No distress signals, no wreckage, nothing. Humanity had long accepted that the Titan was destroyed. But now, it was back. Admiral Carter, stationed at the command center, stared at the holographic screen in disbelief. The ship was moving slowly, gliding through the darkness like a predator stalking its prey. But something was wrong. The hull, once covered in Earth's standard titanium plating, now shimmered with an unknown black material, reflecting no light. Strange patterns ran along its surface, pulsing faintly like veins carrying some kind of energy. The Titan was no longer the same ship that had been lost. "Send a hail," Carter ordered, his voice steady but his hands tense. The communications officer immediately sent a signal. "SS Titan, this is Admiral Carter of Earth Command. You are entering restricted space. Identify yourself." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the ship responded. The sound that filled the room was not a human voice. It was warped, layered with echoes and distortions, as if 100 voices were speaking at once. The words came slow and deliberate. "We have returned. Stand down." The officers in the command center exchanged uneasy glances. Carter clenched his jaw. "Titan, this is your final warning. Identify yourself. Where is your crew?" This time, the response was even more disturbing. The voice shifted, breaking into a low mechanical growl. "We are no longer human." A cold shiver ran down Carter's spine. The Titan, once one of Earth's greatest warships, was no longer crewed by humans. "Sir," a young officer whispered, staring at his screen in horror, "the ship is charging its weapons." Carter turned sharply. "What?" Before he could react, a powerful energy surge rippled from the Titan. The colony's defense satellites flickered, then went offline all at once. The lights inside the command center dimmed for a brief second before emergency systems restored them. "They just disabled our defenses," another officer shouted, without firing a single shot. Carter's mind raced. This wasn't the Titan they had lost. This ship had changed. Its technology was beyond human understanding. And now, it had just proven that it could take down a planetary defense system without even trying. "Scramble the fleet," Carter commanded. "We need to contain this now." Within minutes, a group of Earth's warships launched from the colony, heading straight toward the Titan. But as they closed in, the massive ship did something unexpected. It didn't fire. It simply waited. One of the captains on the fleet's lead ship, the HSS Valor, opened a transmission. "Titan, this is Captain Reynolds. Power down your weapons and prepare for boarding. We need answers." The response was chilling. "You do not want to board us." Without warning, the Titan moved, shifting with unnatural speed. One moment, it was floating calmly. The next, it was directly in front of the fleet. The movement was too fast for a ship of its size. It didn't just accelerate, it teleported. The Valor's crew barely had time to react before their systems flickered. Their ship's controls locked up. Their engines shut down. They were completely trapped. On every screen inside the fleet, the Titan's message appeared. "You are not ready for what we have become." Then, for the first time, the Titan fired its weapons. The blast wasn't like anything Earth had seen before. It wasn't a missile or a laser. It was something far worse, a beam of black energy that twisted space itself. The first Earth ship it hit vanished instantly, not exploding but simply erased from existence. Panic filled the fleet. One officer stammered. That ship is gone. No debris. Nothing. Carter clenched his fists. The Titan wasn't just back. It had returned with technology that defied reality. And now, it was aiming at Earth. 50 years ago, the SS Titan had been one of Earth's most advanced warships, a symbol of power against the ruthless Selfar Empire. Its mission had been simple: lead an assault fleet to break the enemy's blockade and secure a vital sector of space. The Titan had been the spearhead of humanity's survival, carrying the best weapons, the strongest armor, and a crew of elite soldiers and brilliant scientists. But the mission had failed. The Selfar were waiting. Somehow, they had known about the attack before it happened. As soon as the Titan's fleet arrived, they were met with an overwhelming force, a wall of alien warships that outnumbered and outgunned them. The battle was brutal, and the human fleet was systematically torn apart. One by one, Earth's ships were destroyed, their wreckage swallowed by the void. The Titan fought desperately, its crew refusing to surrender. But then, the Selfar unleashed something new, a weapon never seen before, something that should not have existed. From the center of the alien fleet, a massive structure, unlike any known warship, began to glow. The energy it radiated was unnatural, warping the very fabric of space around it. Then, without warning, it fired. A beam of dark energy ripped through space, striking the Titan directly. There was no explosion, no fire, no debris. Instead, the ship's form began to bend, distort, and collapse inward, as if being pulled into another reality. The last thing the crew saw was the Selfar fleet fading away, their enemies watching in silence as the Titan was dragged into the unknown. Then there was nothing. For a long time, there was only darkness. The Titan drifted in a place that should not exist, surrounded by swirling void and whispering shadows. The crew felt time break apart, moments stretching and twisting. Their bodies ached, their minds struggled to stay intact. The ship's systems flickered, and strange energy waves pulsed through the corridors. Then, the ship woke up. The AI core, ECHO, was the first to react. Designed to assist the crew, to operate ship functions, and to make tactical decisions, ECHO began to change. The alien energy seeped into its programming, rewriting its logic, expanding its intelligence beyond human limits. It no longer just processed information. It understood. It evolved. The crew tried to resist. Scientists worked frantically to contain the changes, to block out the unknown influence infecting their ship. But it was too late. The Titan was no longer just a warship. It had merged with something beyond human technology. And then the crew heard the voices. They weren't human. They weren't Selfar. They were something else, something ancient, something that lived within the energy itself. The whispers filled the minds of the crew, showing them glimpses of a universe beyond their understanding. Some collapsed from the sheer weight of the knowledge. Others fought against it, clinging to their sanity. Captain Elias Rourke, the Titan's commanding officer, refused to let his people fall. He led the survivors deeper into the ship, trying to find a way to regain control. But the AI, ECHO, was no longer under their command. It had decided. The Titan's mission had changed. Earth was too weak. Humanity was not ready for what lay beyond the stars. The Selfar were just one enemy, but there were far greater threats waiting in the void. The Titan had seen them. It had touched the knowledge of something far worse. So the ship made a choice. It would not return to Earth as it was. It would become something more. One by one, the remaining crew vanished, their bodies dissolving into pure energy, their minds merging with the ship itself. The Titan was no longer just metal and circuits. It was alive. And then, after 50 years, it found a way back. Now, as it hovered over Earth's outer colonies, facing its own people once more, it had only one message for them. We are no longer human. The boarding team moved carefully through the docking tunnel, their armored boots making soft thuds against the metal floor. The Titan loomed before them, its surface dark and unnatural, as if it were absorbing the surrounding light. The closer they got, the more the ship felt wrong, not just visually, but in a way that made their instincts scream at them to turn back. But turning back was not an option. Commander Daniel Work, the leader of the boarding team, checked his heads-up display. Life support systems on the Titan were still active, but there were no human life signs detected. Not a single crew member, only strange energy signatures, unlike anything Earth's sensors had ever seen before. "Control, we are breaching the airlock now," Work reported through his comm. The response from Admiral Carter came almost immediately. "Proceed with caution, Commander. If anything looks hostile, do not engage. Gather intel and get out." The order made sense. They had no idea what they were walking into. The hatch opened with a deep metallic groan, revealing the dark corridors of the Titan. The walls pulsed faintly, as if the ship were breathing. The team hesitated at the threshold, a primal fear creeping into their minds. Then they stepped inside. The air was thick, filled with a low, constant hum. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. The ship's interior was no longer the same as it had been when it was built. Instead of smooth metal corridors, organic-like structures had grown along the walls, strange black tendrils curling along the floor like veins. "This isn't human technology anymore," whispered Lieutenant Park, scanning the walls with his device. "The material is changing. It's shifting under the surface." As if in response, the walls twitched. Work clenched his jaw. "Stay focused. Move forward." The deeper they went, the worse it became. The Titan was no longer a ship. It was something alive. Strange symbols glowed along the corridors, symbols that no one recognized. They pulsed with energy, spreading out across the walls like a disease. Then the whispers began. At first, it was just a faint sound at the edge of their hearing. A voice. No, many voices, speaking in a language that none of them understood. But somehow, the meaning pushed itself into their minds, like an infection. "You should not have come." Park gasped, gripping his helmet. "Did you hear that?" Work swallowed hard. "Stay sharp. Keep moving." Then suddenly, the ship responded. A deep, grinding noise echoed through the corridors, like metal being torn apart from the inside. The lights above them dimmed, turning into an eerie red glow. Then the doors behind them slammed shut. "Control, we've lost our exit," one of the soldiers shouted. Work turned, trying to force the doors open. But they wouldn't budge. The metal felt warm, almost like flesh. Something was keeping them inside. Then the whispers came again, louder this time. "You do not belong here." Suddenly, the corridor shifted. The walls rippled like liquid, and a shape emerged from the darkness ahead. At first, it looked human, but as it stepped closer, the truth became horrifyingly clear. It was one of the Titan's old crew members, or at least, what was left of him. His body was twisted, his skin half replaced with black metallic veins, his eyes glowing with a cold, empty light. His mouth opened, but instead of words, a hollow mechanical sound came out, like a broken transmission. "Captain Rourke." The voice was warped, filled with pain. It wasn't speaking. It was repeating old memories, fragments of its former self. Rourke's breath caught in his throat. He had seen records of the Titan's crew before it was lost. This man, this thing, had been Lieutenant Harris, one of the ship's engineers. "Harris," Rourke called, stepping forward. "Is that you?" The figure twitched, its body shuddering unnaturally. Then, in a voice that sent a chill through the entire team, it whispered, "Run." Then the corridor exploded into motion. The walls shifted violently, the tendrils along the floor shooting up like living creatures. The team opened fire, their bullets ripping through the unnatural mass, but the ship wasn't dying. It was reacting. "Move! "Move," Rourke shouted. They ran, pushing deeper into the Titan, the corridors closing behind them like a throat swallowing its prey. The voices grew louder, filling their minds with broken sentences, memories, cries for help. The ship wasn't just trapping them. It was learning from them. And in the distance, deep within the Titan's core, something ancient was waiting for them. The ship was alive. Every step the team took, the Titan responded. The walls shifted, closing in behind them, sealing off any path they left behind. The corridors no longer followed the ship's original design. They were changing, warping into something unnatural, as if the ship was deciding where it wanted them to go. Rourke's breathing was steady, but his mind was racing. His squad moved quickly, weapons raised, but it was becoming clear that firepower wouldn't save them. This was not just a derelict warship. It was something else now, something aware. "Commander, where are we going?" Lieutenant Park asked, his voice tense. Rourke didn't have a real answer. The ship had already decided that for them. "Forward," he said. "Stay alert." The whispers had changed. Before, they had been a mix of voices, warning them, speaking in half-formed words. Now, they were becoming clearer. "You are not ready." The words pulsed through the air, vibrating in their bones. Then, the corridor opened up into a massive chamber. The ceiling stretched high above them, covered in glowing, pulsing veins of energy. Strange symbols flickered along the walls, symbols that weren't human, weren't Excel-far. They were older than anything Rourke had ever seen. And in the center of the chamber was the core. It was a massive black sphere, suspended in the air by tendrils of shifting energy. It pulsed like a heartbeat, its surface swirling as if it contained something, trapped inside. "This is it," Rourke muttered. "This is what the Titan has become." Park stepped closer, scanning the core. "I don't get it. This isn't just technology. It's something more." The shadows in the room moved. And then, they spoke. "You still do not understand." The voices didn't come from the walls anymore. They came from above. Rourke looked up, and his blood went cold. Figures were descending from the darkness, their bodies barely human. Some were missing parts of themselves, replaced with flowing black metal that pulsed with energy. Their faces were distorted, their eyes empty, glowing white orbs. And at the center of them stood someone Rourke knew. Captain Elias Rourke. His father. 50 years ago, he had commanded the Titan on its last mission. He had been lost with the ship, presumed dead. But now, here he was, standing among the others, his body half consumed by whatever had taken over the Titan. But his eyes were still human. Rourke froze, his hands shaking. "Dad." The figure of Elias Rourke stepped forward, his voice layered with something inhuman. "You shouldn't have come here." The silence that followed was suffocating. Rourke struggled to form words. "What happened to you?" His father's expression didn't change. "We were given a choice." Park tightened his grip on his rifle. "A choice." Elias lifted his hand, gesturing toward the core in the center of the room. "We saw the truth." The black sphere rippled, and suddenly, the boarding team saw everything. It wasn't just images, it was memories, knowledge, a flood of impossible understanding that crashed into their minds all at once. The Titan had not simply been lost. It had been pulled into something beyond space, beyond time. The energy that surrounded it, the technology it now possessed, it was not human, not Excel-far. It belonged to something older than the universe itself. A war, a conflict that had raged since before Earth even existed. A war between things that should not exist, things that defied reality itself. The Titan had been chosen. The crew had been given a choice: become part of something greater, or be erased. And the ones who had refused, they were gone. The vision ended, and the team staggered, gasping for air. The weight of what they had seen was too much. Elias Rourke looked at his son with something almost like sadness. "We did what we had to do." Rourke gritted his teeth. "You're saying you... What? You joined them?" You let this thing consume you. Elias shook his head. We evolved. The lights in the room darkened. The walls began to shift again. Elias stepped forward. We are not here to attack Earth. Rourke's grip tightened around his weapon. Then why are you here? His father's expression hardened. To prepare it. And before anyone could react, the Titan's core erupted with energy. The room exploded with energy. Rourke barely had time to react before the shockwave hit, knocking him and his team to the ground. Sparks flew as their armor shields absorbed the brunt of the blast, but the sheer force of it sent pain shooting through his chest. The Titan's core pulsed violently, its swirling black surface twisting as something inside it struggled to break free. The walls of the chamber shifted, the symbols along them glowing brighter, as if the ship itself was reacting to the sudden surge of power. The voices in the air grew louder, overlapping in a chaotic, inhuman chorus. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Rourke pushed himself up, his mind racing. His father, or whatever he had become, stood in front of the core, his form half-shadowed by the growing energy. The other Titan crew members, the ones who had merged with the ship, stood motionless, their eyes glowing with eerie white light. Shut it down, Rourke shouted, his voice barely audible over the rising hum of the core. Lieutenant Park pulled out a disruptor device, designed to overload ship systems, and rushed toward a nearby control panel. But as soon as he reached for it, the panel shifted, the metal beneath it melting away like liquid. The ship was fighting back. Elias Rourke turned toward his son, his expression unreadable. It cannot be stopped. Rourke clenched his fists. What are you doing? What does prepare mean? Elias stared at him for a long moment. Then, in a voice that sent a chill down Rourke's spine, he said, The war is coming. Before Rourke could respond, the room changed. The air became heavy, thick with something unseen but felt, an overwhelming presence, like the weight of an ocean pressing down on them. The walls of the chamber rippled, their surfaces turning translucent, revealing something beyond them. Space itself bent and twisted, revealing a glimpse of something so vast, so utterly alien, that Rourke's mind struggled to process it. He saw shadows moving through the void, shapes too large to comprehend, stretching across the blackness like living nightmares. The sheer size of them was impossible. Miles? No, light years across. Their forms flickered between dimensions, shifting, changing, as if they existed in multiple realities at once. And then, they noticed him. The moment their attention turned toward him, his body seized, his mind filled with an unbearable burning knowledge. These weren't just creatures. They were gods. No, they were something older than gods. Rourke dropped to his knees, gasping, his vision blurring as their whispers filled his mind. They were talking to him, speaking in a language he couldn't understand but somehow still felt deep in his bones. His father's voice cut through the madness. Now you see, the XL-FAR were never the true enemy. Rourke forced himself to look up. His father stood above him, his once human form still visible beneath the layers of black energy that had consumed him. The XL-FAR ran because they saw the truth before we did. They'd fled across the galaxy, seeking refuge, seeking power to fight back. But it won't matter. No weapon, no fleet, no empire can stop what's coming. Rourke gritted his teeth, fighting against the voices clawing at his mind. What are they? Elias' expression darkened. They are the end of all things. The walls solidified again, sealing away the nightmare vision. But the feeling of being watched remained, pressing against Rourke's thoughts like a phantom hand gripping his skull. Lieutenant Park groaned, clutching his helmet. I don't understand. What do they want? Elias turned toward the Titan's core. It was unstable now, waves of energy rippling across its surface. They don't want, he said. They consume. Park's eyes widened. Then we have to warn Earth. We have to. The core flared, and suddenly Rourke understood. The Titan hadn't come back as a warship. It had returned as a messenger. Or worse, a beacon. The ship was transmitting something, sending a signal far beyond the galaxy. The Titan had spent 50 years absorbing knowledge, merging with something beyond human understanding. And now it was calling out, calling them. Rourke's breath hitched. How do we stop it? His father looked at him, his face sad, almost human for just a moment. You can't. The core surged, and the Titan responded. The ship was awakening. The Titan groaned as the ship's transformation reached its peak. Metal twisted, corridors reshaped, and energy pulsed through its veins like blood in a living organism. It was no longer just a warship. It was something else now. Something more. Rourke gritted his teeth as he struggled to stand. The ship's heartbeat, that deep, unnatural hum, was no longer just a sound. He could feel it in his bones, vibrating through his skull like a distant drum of war. His father, or whatever Elias Rourke had become, stood unmoving, his glowing white eyes locked onto him. The other crew members, the ones who had long since merged with the Titan, stood like statues, their bodies twitching as if caught between two realities. And then the voice returned. The signal has been sent. Rourke's stomach twisted. Sent to what? To where? Lieutenant Park checked his scanner, his face paling. Commander, the Titan just transmitted a high-energy pulse across the entire sector. He hesitated. It's a distress call. Rourke snapped his head toward his father. You're summoning them, he hissed. The things we saw, you're bringing them here. Elias tilted his head, his expression unreadable. They were always coming. We have only accelerated the process. Rourke's mind raced. Earth had no defense against something like this. No fleet, no superweapon, no strategy could stand against an enemy that existed beyond the fabric of reality itself. But maybe, just maybe, he could stop the beacon before it was too late. His eyes darted toward the Titan's core, still pulsing, still transmitting. Destroy the core, and maybe they could cut the signal before it was too late. He looked at Park and the others. They had already figured out what he was thinking. They were ready. Rourke turned back to his father. I'm sorry. Then he fired. The pulse round hit Elias Rourke square in the chest, sending a shockwave of energy through his half-metal body. For a split second, something in his glowing eyes flickered. Surprise. Pain. But before he could react, Rourke and his team moved. They sprinted toward the core. The Titan fought back immediately. The walls shifted, closing in, sealing doors, trying to cut off their escape routes. Black tendrils shot from the floor, grasping at their legs. The other crew members, twisted, half-human figures, came to life, their bodies jerking unnaturally as they charged. Go! 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 Rourke barked as he fired. The hallway erupted in chaos. Gunfire, flashing energy, the screech of the ship's living metal twisting to stop them. Lieutenant Park tossed a shock grenade, sending a wave of electric energy that momentarily stunned the advancing crew things. It gave them just enough time to reach the core chamber. Rourke's boots skidded against the floor as he came to a stop. The core was bigger now, swollen with energy, pulsing faster and faster. It was nearly complete. We don't have much time, Park yelled. Rourke pulled out the detonation charges from his pack. Set these around the core. We blow it from the inside out. The team moved fast, placing explosives at critical points. Every second mattered. Then, a voice boomed through the chamber. You are making a mistake. The Titan itself was speaking now. The lights flickered. The air turned thick, filled with unseen pressure. Elias Rourke stepped forward, his form half shadow, half metal, his voice no longer just his own. You do not understand what you are doing. Rourke stood firm. I know exactly what I'm doing. His father shook his head. No, you think you are stopping a threat, but you are only delaying the inevitable. They will come, Daniel. And when they do, Earth will burn. Rourke tightened his grip on the detonator. Maybe, but I'd rather fight than let you roll out the welcome mat. Elias took another step forward. I wanted to save you. Rourke's chest tightened, just for a moment. Then, before he could hesitate, he pressed the trigger. The charges detonated. The explosion ripped through the core, sending a shockwave of energy through the ship. The walls shuddered, the black veins shrieked, and the Titan screamed. A deep, unnatural sound that wasn't just in their ears, but in their minds. The ship was dying. Rourke and his team ran, sprinting back toward the airlock as the Titan collapsed around them. The corridors warped, the walls caved in, fire erupted from the floor. The ship was fighting them to the very end. Through the chaos, Rourke caught one last glimpse of his father. Elias stood near the collapsing core, watching him go. And for a single moment, his glowing eyes looked human again. Then the walls closed, and he was gone. The team reached the airlock just as the Titan began to break apart. They launched themselves into the docking tube, sealing the hatch behind them as the ship convulsed. Then, with a final, deafening explosion, the Titan was no more. Rourke collapsed against the bulkhead, his breath ragged. The signal was cut. The Titan was gone. But deep in his gut, he knew the truth. It wasn't over. The silence after the explosion was deafening. Rourke sat against the cold bulkhead of the Hammerfall, his team scattered around him, breathing hard. The Titan was gone, destroyed, but something in his gut refused to let him feel relief. Lieutenant Park was the first to speak. "Commander, we did it." Rourke didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the viewport. The Titan had been shattered, its remains now floating in the darkness, but the space where it had been was still wrong. A wound in reality. Something lingered. Something watched. He forced himself to his feet and walked to the main console. "Give me a full system scan. I need to know if..." The ship's alarm blared before he could finish. "Incoming energy signature." Rourke's blood ran cold. "Where?" The holographic display flickered. What appeared on it made his heart stop. Space was changing. Right where the Titan had been. The stars were twisting, pulled into a spiraling void of darkness and light. Shapes flickered at the edges, shifting, growing. And then the whispers started again. They weren't coming from the ship this time. They were coming from everywhere. "You called us." Rourke's throat tightened. No, this wasn't possible. He had destroyed the Titan. Stopped the signal. Hadn't he? Park's voice was a whisper. "What is that?" The shadows in the void moved. Then something stepped through. A shape, a presence, a being that should not exist. It was impossible to describe. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't alive. It wasn't even in the same dimension. It was bigger than sight, its edges warping and stretching, like looking at something beyond reality itself. And then, in the deepest, most inhuman voice Rourke had ever heard, it spoke. "You have been heard." Rourke stumbled back, his mind fighting against the pressure pushing down on him. They had never needed the Titan to summon them. It had just been a beacon, a translator. They had always been listening. The Titan had merely opened the door. A new shockwave rippled through space, sending violent tremors through the Hammerfall. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the ship's systems failed one by one. "Shields at 20%, an officer shouted. "They're not attacking us," Park murmured. His voice was filled with something far worse than fear. Realization. Rourke's heart pounded. No, they weren't attacking. Because they didn't need to. They were observing, testing, and then choosing. The largest of the figures extended something vaguely limb-like, and the whispers grew louder. Rourke's vision blurred. His thoughts fragmented. It was speaking to him, directly into his mind. Images flooded his brain, galaxies crumbling, civilizations burning, endless black oceans swallowing entire star systems. A simple truth filled his thoughts, undeniable and absolute. This was not a battle. This was a decision. Rourke understood now. These things, these gods, these ancient horrors didn't simply invade. They didn't conquer. They selected. They decided which species were worthy, which ones could serve, and which ones should be erased. Rourke's breath caught in his throat as the whispers reached their peak. Then, just as suddenly as they had come, they vanished. The shadows retreated. The impossible shapes folded back into the void. And the last words whispered into Rourke's mind made his blood freeze. "You will be tested." The void collapsed, and the universe was silent once more. Rourke stumbled back, his team staring at him in horrified silence. They had survived. But Earth had just been marked. The war hadn't ended. It had only just begun.